Good morning, everybody, for real. We are towards the bottom of Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. We are just kind of 3 lines from the bottom Amar Rav Huna. We're just kind of going to finish up the sugya of Kiyum Shtaros and then move. The next Mishnah moves into Pesh Aser, Pesha Hitter, which is, of course, something that we spoke about a little bit in this Masechta. So Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav, right? Something that we saw. There's this idea of Kiyum Shtaros, meaning you have a star comes into Bezdin, it's got 2 Eidim on it. There's a process where you have to be Mekayim the star itself. And it's a process that requires 3 Dayanim. 3 Dayanim will sit there, they'll hear the Eidos, whatever it is, and then they'll affix their signatures or whatever it is to the star. So Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav, Shlosha sheyashvu lekayim es star. You have 3 Dayanim that sat, they heard the testimony, and they're ready to basically, be Mekayim the star. But Vikara ir alecha mehen. All of a sudden, right, this dramatic moment, all of a sudden there's some sort of rumor, there's some sort of complaint on one of the Dayanim. So you have Dayan 1, 2, and 3. All of a sudden on the 3rd Dayan, there's some sort of error that says he's not a proper Dayan. So what do? So Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav, so what they said was, Ad shelo chasmu, if Dayan number 1 and number 2 haven't yet signed their names to the star, so then Eden Allah v'chosim. So then what they can do is Dayan number 1 and 2, they can say, listen, I know there's some sort of error that says that this guy's not an appropriate Dayan. We can be made to the fact that he is a good Dayan, and then the 3 of us can sign. That'll kind of clear up the issue, and then the 3 of us can sign. But Misha Chasmu, but if Dayan number 1 and number 2 have already signed their names, Ein Eden Allah v'chosim, then they can't testify to the kashrus of this 3rd Dayan. And Rashi points out it's because they're kind of nogei b'davar. Once they've signed their names to it, they're nogei b'davar, and then they can't. There obviously is some sort of issue. We feel they don't want to be associated with like a 3rd kind of bad Dayan. So they haven't yet signed. They say, fine, you guys can be made, and then everyone can sign. But once you signed already, then you can no longer be made about this 3rd guy, and you got to figure out something else. So the Gemara asks, this whole case, we didn't really explain, what was the rumor that started about this 3rd Dayan? Error demai. What is this rumor? Error de Gazlanusa. If, for some reason there's some sort of rumor that he's like a Gazlan, therefore he's a puzzle 8. So basically, maybe 2 Eidim came in and said, this 3rd Dayan is an inappropriate Dayan because he's a Gazlan. So Treva Traininu. So the Gemara says, I don't even understand. How did Dayan number 1 and number 2 just give Eidos and then make everything better? You'd have a Trey versus Trey, and you wouldn't just let this 3rd Dayan just now sign. So it can't be that the error was that he's like a Gazlan or something like that. So the error to begam mishpacha. So the Gemara says, okay, so then maybe the Eidos isn't coming in saying that this 3rd Dayan is a Gazlan. It's just saying that Rashi says he's an Eved Kanani, right? He's a mamzer. He's something like there's some sort of pagam, and therefore he's not able to be a Dayan. But the Gemara says, Gilui milsa ba'almahu. But then, even if the 2 guys did sign already, Dayan number 1 and number 2, they should be able to clarify whether he's a mamzer or Nevi Kanani. That's not something that someone would be nogea be'edos. Even if someone is a nogea be'edos, even if you're a brother or something like that, that's an objective fact whether a guy's an Eved Kanani. Just go figure it out, right? We don't really care who the Dayan is, as long as Bezdin, we just need to figure out, is this guy an Eved Kanani or is he not an Eved Kanani? So we shouldn't be concerned with whether they've already signed. There's no reason to think it would be nogea b'davar there. So again, what exactly is this rumor that's giving us pause about the 3rd Dayan? So the Gemara says, it must be like the first way we were understanding, that the error is that this guy is a Gazlan. But the 8 Dayan number 1 and number 2 will say Yadinan Bey the Abed Tshuva. We're not going to dispute the fact that he was a Gazlan. Of course he was a Gazlan. We all know he was a Gazlan. But we happen to know he did Tshuva. And this is a big klal in the sugyas of Trey versus Trey. Trey versus Trey means you have 2 Eidim, 2 Kitei Eidim that are really butting heads, right? One kat says, Ruvain lent money to Shimon. The other one says Ruvain did not lend money to Shimon. But what if you have one kat says Ruvain lent money to Shimon, and the other one says he did, but Shimon paid it back? That's not Trey versus Trey, right? You can harmonize that, and that makes sense. And that's what happened over here. The first 2 Eidim said, Dayan number 3 is not a good Dayan because he's a Gazlan. And the other guy said, I know he's a Gazlan. That was in his past. He's done Shuvah since then, and therefore he's an appropriate Dayan. So Amar Reb Zera, Hal Milsa Mary Abba Shemieli. I heard this thing that we're about to say from Rav Abba and Vilav Rav Abba de Min Akko, and had it not been for Rav Abba de Min Akko, Shechachta, I would have forgotten this. So this next klal, thank you very much to Rav Abba. Gimel sheyashvu l'kayim shtar. What happens in a situation where you have 3 dayanim? They are ready to be makayim the shtar. Umeis echad mehem. And now one of them dies. Now again, normally we want all 3 of the dayanim to sign their name, so everyone will know going forward this was a proper shtar. But now one of the guys died, so you can't have 3 people sign the shtar. What are you supposed to do? Tzrich and the michtav. What the other 2 should do is they should write on this. The most of tlasa havina. We were 3 dayanim. And one of us is no longer. One of us died. The point is, you want to make it clear on the shtar that no one should ever have a pretext later to say this wasn't a good kiyum shtar. So only had 2 dayanim. We need 3 dayanim, and there's only 2. So give yourself, make it very clear on the face of the shtar exactly what happened. Amr of Nachman bar Yitzchak. Nachman Yitzchak said, I don't think that's even necessary to spell out the whole story. We were 3 people, and one guy died. He just says, because of a shtara, dinan nafek l'kanmana beidina sulo tzarach. All you have to do is basically say, this thing was Mekayim in a proper Bezdin, and everyone knows that Bezdin means 3. So people will figure out on their own. I don't know what happened to the 3rd guy, whatever, he left, but whatever it was. But as long as you can say that this was done in front of a Bezdin, that's good enough. But the Gemara asks, B'dilma Bezdin chatzafu, hu Shmuel, Damer Shmuel, Shnaim Shadanu Dineim Din, Elish Nikra Bezdin chatzaf. Shmuel had a shita that said that even though really a Bezdin requires 3, if you just did with 2, it's still a valid Bezdin, but we call them a Bezdin chatzah, whatever it is, or a chutzpah, or a chutzpahdik Bezdin. The point is, just because you write on the shtar this was done before Bezdin, doesn't necessarily mean it was done before 3 people. And Kiyum Shtaros needs 3 people, not just a good Bezdin. So how can you be so sure if you just say Bezdin, that's good enough? So he answers, they weren't just going to write it would happen in front of a Bezdin. They were going to say, Beidina Draban Ashi. They were going to say not only was it any Bezdin, it was like the premier Bezdin in the city. Rashi points out it's Lavdavka, Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi happened to be the Rosh Hashiva of Masa Mechasi, which is where Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak was. So the point is to be like, not only was this the Bezdin, this was the CRC. Like, all right, they weren't going to do anything inappropriate. And clearly, if you say it was done before the CRC or Rav Ashi in Masa Mechasya, everyone will know it was done properly. But Gemara still kind of goes at it and they say, okay, but Dilma Rabbanan Debe Rav Ashi to the Shmuel Svirlu. Right, I hear it was a good Bezdin, but Shmuel was also someone that you can rely on. I mean, maybe they just rely on Shmuel. And still, even though it was only 2 people, at least B'di'eved, they would have passed that it's okay. And again, Kiyum Shtaros requires 3, not just a valid Bezdin. So they say, no, the Kasev Bey, not only is it in front of the Bezdin of Rav Ashi, but the Kasev Bey, but Amar Lana Rabbana Ashi. You would make it clear in the shtar that Rav Ashi himself was connected to the shtar. He himself gave his askam on the shtar, and therefore it's clear they weren't relying on any b'di'eveds. There was a proper bezdin, it was a proper dayanim of 3 dayanim, and whatever, one guy died or whatever it is. And so that's what would have happened over there. So moving along, we just finished the sugya of Kiyum Shtaros. Now we're going to move into.
Say that it can't be done by.
Now, Kiyum Shtaros needs 3 people. What happened over here was they had 3 people, one of them died. So the question is, how do you make it clear on the shtar that we had 3 people? So the first guy, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, said, just spell out the story. We were 3 people and one guy died. The second person said, you don't really need to go through all the details, but just say this was, not only in our Bezdin, it was the CRC, and not only was it the CRC, it was with Rabbi Reese, and he was there. Everyone will know that it was done properly. It was done with 3 people. All right, so this next Gemara is going to take us back to some of the end of sugyas and Yavamis, and it's some good stuff. Ha'isha sha'amra eshes ish hayisi. A woman, for whatever reason, she's in court, and she says, you should know, even though everyone thinks of me as a pnuya, I was at one point married, but I'm also, I got divorced. Nemena, she's believed to get remarried. Shapesha asar hua shahiter. But of course, if there's Adim that can say that, no, we know she was married, we were at our wedding. He Omeres Grushani, and she says, you're right, I was married, but I'm now divorced. And in a menace. Of course, now she's not believed because she doesn't have the same Pesha Asr Pesha Hitter. Adim said she was married. Amra, Nishbasi, same case, but for whatever reason, let's say she wants to now marry a Kohen, and maybe the Masada Kedushin's like, hey, have you ever, is there any reason you can't marry a Kohen? And she's like, actually, I was once captured, but Utahorani, but I was not violated. So therefore, I'm still kosher l'kahuna. Nemenes shapesha asar hu apesha hitter. But but if there were edim that she had been captured, but she still maintains I wasn't violated. And then the last line of the Mishnah, if she was already married and Adam came, harezu lo teitze. As Rashi points out right here, the Gemara is going to get into exactly what this line is getting at, so we'll leave it for now. It's not for today. Amar Ravasi.
This is where she's married to.
Well, the Gemara is going to get into it exactly what the case is. Not today's stuff, so we'll leave it. We'll leave it for y'all. Amar Ravasi. Minayin la pesha aser hu pesha hitter min Torah. Do we have a source for this concept of pesha aser hu pesha hitter from the Torah? Shenamar. The source is espiti nesati leish hazel isha. The context over there is in Moti Shemra. It's in the middle of Devarim, and this is like the Torah's case of Pesach Patuach Matzasi. So what happens? A man gets married, and the next morning, whatever it is, he comes in Beis Din and he says, Lo matzadam basulam, Pesach Pasuach, whatever he says, right? And it's funny because in the beginning of the Masechta, we had all these cases, right? So either the wife says nothing, she doesn't, maybe she says Mukaseitzani or Mishra Astani and Nasti. Here we have kind of like a third example. What happens when her father gets involved and he gets the bed sheets and he comes in a Beis Din and he says, I don't know what this guy's talking about. My daughter certainly had her basulim. And this is the case of Moti Shemer. So what happens? The Beis Din looks into it. And if it turns out the guy was lying and he was being Moti Laz on this woman, there's a knas. He has to pay 100 zuz. He has to marry her. She wants to be married to him. And it's a whole thing. That is the case of Moti Shemer in the Torah. So Rav Asi says, from this pasuk, you also have the source to Pesha or Pesha Hitter. Why? Because the pasuk says, "As biti nasati leish hazel isha leish as biti nasati leish." Right? This woman was assumed to have been a pnuya, assumed to be mutter to everyone. But then when the father says, "I gave her to this person," asra. Now she's asra to the whole world. Hazeh, when the father says, I didn't just give her to anybody, I gave her to this person, Hatera. Now she's mutter to the husband. So that's kind of a similar idea of Pesha Asar, who a Pesha Hitter. It's not great because in that case, clearly it wasn't a Pesha Asar, Pesha Hitter because you had a chassan coming in saying we were married. But the point is clearly, and we'll see from the Hemshech tomorrow, clearly there was Misora, that there was a drush to be had in this pasuk. And that, I guess, is the Gemara's first, that's what this pasuk is coming to do. It's coming to teach you the concept of Pesha Asar, Pesha Hitter. But the Gemara attacks right away. But Lamali Kras, why do I even need a pasuk for this? It's a svara. Who asra? Who shar? The same way that a guy can asr something. If he's the reason why we know it's asr, he can also matter it. Ella, you're right. That can't be what this pasuk's coming to do. And therefore, we have to know. So what is this? What is the drasha to be had in this pasuk? Ella ki it's kra l'charav huna marav. Damar huna marav minayin la'av shenem l'esor espito. How is a father? How do we know that he's generally able to aser his daughter minatorah shenemar espiti nasati leish, because the pasuk says he's believed to say espiti nasati leish. So the Gemara says hazeh lamali. So what is the next word hazeh? What does that do? Mibayale l'chatani Reb Yonah. The Tani Reb Yonah espiti nasati leish hazeh v'lo yavam. What he learns from the extra word hazeh is this whole parsha of Moti Shemra and the knas and the guy has to marry the girl. That's only if the man was an initial kedushin. But if it was a case of yibum, meaning Ruvain is married to lady, and then they were never able to finish the nisuin, Ruvain dies, and it's a case of yibum. Now Shimon does yibum, and he marries this girl, and the next morning he comes in and he says Pesach Pasuach Matzasi, and the father takes the bedsheets and this whole dramatic spectacle. It's not a case of Moti Shemra. Shimon would not get the knas. Shimon wouldn't have to marry. This whole parsha of Adam's own. This whole parsha of Moti Shemra is dafka with an initial kedushin and a woman, not with the case of yibum, and that's what we learn from Hazeh. Okay.
If she was married before, why couldn't you even have a time?
So this is obviously the case with where she wasn't married before.
Well, she had kedushin.
She had kedushin, but don't assume it. Yeah, sorry, I misunderstood your question. It would be a case where Reuben was married to the girl; they didn't do nisuin. Yibum still applies as long as it was a kedushin. It doesn't need to be a nisuin. Taner Rabbanan. Ha'isha she'amra eshes ish ani. A woman comes in a Beis Din for whatever her reason, and she says, I was married. The chazra amra kunuyani. And then she later says, no, psych, just kidding. So in the case of the Mishnah, she said, I was married, but she has a reason. She says, I got divorced. My husband died, whatever it is. Now she's saying, I was married. I'm just kidding. I wasn't actually married. Can we believe her or not? And the Gemara says, Nemenes. The Brisa says Nemenes.
I don't know.
So you vote no. So the Gemara is going to say exactly what you said. Why? Right? We know that's a concept, right, from some of the earlier famous sugyas that a person can just, make themselves a particular Yisur. And that seems to be what she did. She doesn't have a good explanation. She just basically just said she was Asur. And now she says she's kidding. So Amar Rava Barav Huna, you got to kind of read the fine print. She's only going to be believed if she comes in and has a good explanation for why she initially said that she was Mikudeshes. Tananami Hach, we have a similar brisa. Amra Eshes Ish Ani, the Chazra Amra Nuyani. Later she comes in and says, I was just kidding, I'm actually a Pnuya. She's actually not believed. But in Nasla Amasla Dvarah, but if she can give you a good explanation for why she said this, we have a story to illustrate this. Isha Achas Gedola, she was a prominent woman. Shaisa Gedola Benoy, she was a beautiful woman. The Kaftu Allah B'nei Adam Lakacha. So Shadchanim were all over her, and people wanted to marry her. Va'amr lahem, I'm busy, I'm married, whatever it is. Liyamim amda v'kishas asma. All of a sudden, one day she gets married. Amr lachachamim ma ra'is lasos gain. How were you able to do this? Why were you lying all this time? So Amr lahem. When people came and they wanted to marry me, but I didn't want to marry them. Amarti, that was the easiest way to get them to get off my back. I said, I'm already married. Now that there's a shidduch that I want, amarati v'kidashi esals me. Vizu halacha, and this halacha heller of achas harabir lefnechacham b'husha, but amru. And they said, in nasnu amasal advarea, if a woman can give a good explanation for why she said that, nah menace.
Yeah, but that's so crazy because she's going in front of court. She's not like telling people like she's hanging with like, oh yeah, kind of shady.
But I don't know why she's in court in the first place.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But being that as it may, Shmuel Merav. So Shmuel now asks Rav. Interesting question. Amra, Tameani, B'chazra Amra to Horani. What if a woman says to her husband, I'm Anita tonight? And then the next day she says, no, I'm Tar. And it's clear she didn't go to the mikvah in between. Mahu. That the next night, can the husband believe her or not? Amra lay, so Rav said back, Afbezu, Nasta, Masla Gref, she can explain why she had a reason to say that she was coming last night and Tar today. Yeah, she had a headache. And then menace. So the point is, Tanamine are buying Zimnin. Shmuel learned over this sugya. He learned over this thing from Rav 40 times. But Shmuel still didn't paskin like this. He was more machmer. And it's interesting if you look at to Alan's. You're joking, but it's very clear in the Rishonim. That's exactly what happened, right? So Rashi says that this was not like this academic discussion between Shmuel and Rav. This was a very ma'aser shahaya that happened to Shmuel. If you look at Tosfos, he actually brings down from the Yerushalmi that's literally what happened. Shmuel's wife said, not in the mood tonight, that was her amasla in the end. But what I thought was interesting was, who are the people here? It's Shmuel and Rav, right? So Shmuel and Rav argue all throughout Shas, right? And we always paskin like Shmuel when it comes to Dini Mominus. We paskin like Rav when it comes to Dini Isser V'Heter. So here it's in Din Isser V'Heter. Shmuel goes to Rav. He says, what do I do? Rav says it's fine, and Shmuel does a reason anyway. But either way, Tana Rabbanan. So this is going to bring us back to the end of Yavamis, these Gemaras. Tana Rabbanan, Shnayim Omrim Meis, Shnayim Omrim Lo Meis. So you've got a woman in court, whatever it is, two people say the husband died, two people say the husband did not die. Shnayim Omrim Nisgarsha, Shnayim Omrim Lo Nisgarsha. Harezu Lo Tinase, this woman should not get married. But if she did get married, we don't make her get divorced. Rav Menachem Bar Yossi Omer Taser. Menachem Bar Yossi argued with the Tanakama, and he said if she does get married, she does have to leave. But Amar of Menachem Bar Yossi, but he says not so fast. When do I say she would have to leave? We're only going to make her get out of this second marriage only if there already was a trey in Bezdin. The second cut of Adam came in and said he did not die, and then she went ahead and got married. But Abel Nises, let's say the first Adam came in and said she's, the husband died, they got divorced, then she got married. Lo Taitzi. We're not gonna, then the Adam come in. We're not going to make her get divorced. But the Gemara says we're going to get there. So, but the Gemara says certainly according to the Tanakama, and even according to some of the cases with Menachem Bar Yossi, you can have a situation where you have a tray, right? Two Adam say he's dead. Two Adam say he's not dead. And we're going to let her stay married. How? Michti, right? Treyu train in who? Habal Labashim Talikai. The man, every single time he's ba on the wife, he's going to have to bring Lashim Tali. How do we allow them to stay married? So Amr of Sheshes, if you recall from the end of Yavamas, Amr of Sheshes, Kigon, Shenises, Lechad Me'edah. You're right. One of the Adim himself, who's sure, right? One of the guys who said that he's dead, he's the guy that married the girl. So he's not going to be chayav of carbon because he's sure. But you're only chayav of carbon if you're not sure. Tosfos kasha, yeah, we should get there. But that you're right. But the Gemara says before we get there, but he gufabashim tali, fine, tali. You're right. Maybe you've answered from the man's perspective. What about from the woman's perspective? She doesn't know. And not only think about the kasha, right? We know from the sugyas and Yavamas, if she did know, if she knew that the guy was dead, she herself can come into Bezdin and say, my husband's dead, and she'd be able to get married. So clearly she doesn't really know. So then shouldn't she have a chiyuv to bring a carbon? So the Gemara says, but Omeres barili. No, you're right. She says, I am positive. You only have to bring an Ashim Tali if Libo Nokfo, if you're not sure, whatever it is. She's saying, I am sure. So before we go weiter, Alan's kasha, right? We had sugyas in Yavamas that basically said, right, anytime the aide himself says, I killed the husband, or, I'm the aide echad that says he's not allowed to be the one to marry the girl. I mean, even if we're going to let her again be married, it's not him. So Tosa says those cases of Yavamas where we're really relying on his testimony alone. Here, the Bryce is clear. There's at least a second person. So it's not, it's not as shady.
Yeah, because even one person.
Normally,
testify.
even the girl.
Yeah.
So the point is, right, if that was the case, we would let him get married to the girl. But here, there's at least two people. So then we're not as worried. So it's this Tosos if you're Kigon, Shenises, La Echad Meida. But it's a very, very, very interesting Rashi over here. If you look at Rashi, Bomeres Barili, again, what's the case? How is she so sure that the guy's dead, right? Again, she didn't see him die, because then we wouldn't have this discussion in the first place. So Rashi says, Ein libi nokvi, I'm not unsure. Shebari li, ilu hayakayim hayabah. That's what she's saying. She's saying, I know he's dead, because I know my husband. If he was alive, he'd come back and get me. That's good enough to get out of the car. Yeah. Either way. So Amr of Yochanan. So again, we had this machlokas tanaim, right? Amr of Yochanan, he's going to be kind of like a machriya. He's going to say somewhere in the middle. Shnayim Omer Mace. Two people said the husband died. Shnayim Omer Lo Mace. Harezi Lo Tinase, then Nises Lo Tetzi. Just like the Chachamim, she shouldn't get married. L'chachila, if she does, we're not going to make her get divorced. Shnayim Omer Niskarsha. Two people said that there was a divorce. Shnayim Omer Lo Niskarsha. Two people said he didn't get divorced. He didn't divorce her. Harezu Lo Tinase. She shouldn't get married. But Nises Tetzi. But this time, if the case is Tetzi, the Gemara asked the obvious kasha, Ma'ishna Reishna, Ma'ishna Seifa. What's the difference? We're going to have three different answers, which is really going to take us to the end of the daf. Amar Abaya, Tirgama be'ed echad. You're right. Rav Yochanan said the case was two eidim. It was a tray, but maybe we misheard. And really, it was only an eid echad. So we'll redefine these cases. Eid echad omer meis. A person comes in and says the husband died, and like Eddie said, and like we spoke out, Hemnu Rabbanan kebei tray. They have that person has nemanis when it comes to Eidus Isha, as if it was two people. So now we have basically two Eidim that said the man died. Now you have one aid saying he didn't die. So therefore, of course, she's allowed to stay married, because we basically have two Eidim, one aid, but we view him as two, that said the man died. We have one aid that said he didn't die. 2 versus 1, 2 wins, and therefore she's allowed to stay married. But the Gemara asks very obvious kasha. Rav Yochanan didn't only say she doesn't have to get divorced. He said she shouldn't even get married in the first place. The Gemara says, why can't she get married in the first place? So the Gemara says, you're right, she could, but Mishum Rav Asi, because we have a member from Rav Asi. Rav Asi, the pasuk in Mishlei, Aser mimcha ikshas peh, uzus v'sayim harchek mimeka. There's a pasuk that basically says we don't want to give a pretext to people to talk about you. So anytime you have an echad that says this way, an echad that says that way, don't get married. If you did, we're not going to make you get divorced. But just try to stay above board, try to find another aid, whatever you have to do. And that's why Rabbi Yochanan would say, because of this pasuk in Mishlei, don't do it. But again, if you did, that's fine. But then we have to explain the sefer too. So remember, the kasha was we have a stira and not really a stira, but there's a difference between a case of where an eid echad says mace and an eid echad says niskarsha, right? So Abaye says, how do you explain the Seifa of Rabbi Yochanan? The Seifa, Eid Echad Omer Niskarsha. One person says there was divorce. The Eid Echad Omer Lo Niskarsha. And the second aid says they didn't get divorced. But remember, we're dealing with a woman who was Becheskas married. Travayu. So it's a good. Well, she I don't know. So it's a good question. Maybe the husband hasn't been around. You're right. That's a good question. And actually, I don't know how far we're going to get today. I don't know how far you guys want to go. But if we end up going onto Chaf Gimel and Aleph, there's another case where this very much comes to play. But for now, let's hold off.
Where are you getting?
Wherever we can end in a few lines, or we can end as far as the two dots in Chaf Gimel and Aleph. It's kind of like one sugya. So we can put it in the chat after, wherever we get up to. So again, the Seifa is Eid Echad says Niskarsha, Eid Echad Omer Lo Niskarsha, Travayu Be'eshes Ish Comicity. But remember, we're dealing with an Eshes Ish, and therefore V'hayed Omer Niskarsha Havel Echad Ve'in Dvar Shel Echad Makom Shnayim. So here you have a situation where a woman was Becheskas married. So where an Eid Echad comes in and says Niskarsha, that's just an Eid Echad. We're not going to believe him. So therefore, you have a woman that's Becheskas married. So of course she shouldn't get married. And if she, but one person says he's dead, he's believed like two. So that, yeah. But where it's only Niskarsha, where so therefore you have a chazaka. So Eid Echad is only believed to say that the person's dead, not believed to say the person's divorced. So therefore it's only an Eid Echad, but you only have an Eid Echad. She's Becheskas married, and therefore, of course, she can't get. Rabbi Yochanan is going to say, not only could she not get married lechatchila, but even if she did get married, we'd literally force her to get divorced. She's still married to the first guy. That was Abaye's way of understanding. But again, Abaye's way of understanding Rabbi Yochanan was to really reinterpret Rabbi Yochanan's case of Shnayim Orim this and Shnayim Orim this to say Eid Echad says this and Eid Echad says this. Rava Amar, Rava says a different teretz. It says the Olam,
because she ought to know whether or not she was divorced.
well, she is not necessarily. And if she has a get, and clearly she doesn't have the get in this case. So we're trying to rely on Eid.
Women are useless.
Except when it comes to testifying that her husband's dead. But one of the answers to the Gemara is basically going to say, let her bring the get. So yeah, we'll get there. But again, obviously we're dealing with a situation where she doesn't have a get. If she had a get, then this wouldn't be a discussion. Rava Amar, the second teretz of the Gemara is Rava Amar la olam treyu trey. He wants to be a little more focused on the text, and he says, no, don't just say it was an Eid Echad. Rabbi Yochanan said treyu trey, and it's going to be a treyu trey. So again, what's the chiluk between the Reish and the Seifa? The Ra Rav Yochanan, the Bar of Shor, Nachum Bar Yossi, Begerishin, below Rav Misa. The case Rav is going to say is Rav Menachem Bar Yossi's case. Two Eidim first came in and said, they died, they divorced. Then two Eidim came and said the other. And now the girl comes after the treyu trey and she gets married. And Rav Yochanan says, when it comes to a case of Misa, I'm going to pass him like the Chachamim and I'm going to let her stay married. When it comes to the case of Gerishin, I'm going to go like Rav Menachem Bar Yossi and I'm going to make them get divorced. What's the chiluk? Why? Clearly she doesn't have the get. Clearly. The next answer we'll get there. But the Bezdin keeps the get? We should never know of such things. Oh, all right. So but that would make everything easier if Bezdin had the get, obviously. But again, so Rava, so what's the difference? Reisha l'seifa, my taima. So he says, Misa eni yichola mekashta. Gerishin yichola mekashta. And what he says is like this: if you think back to all the lumdus at the end of Yavamis, right? Every time a woman is believed when her husband dies, why? What gives this woman the nemanos? Because Bezdin has a certain confidence that she did a proper due diligence, right? Isha daiku mitzvah. If the man comes in, if he walks in, like Alan suggested before, she's in a whole world of tzaros right now. The kids are mamzerim, and she can't marry this one, she can't marry that one, she can never marry a Kohen, she can't do this. So if we have two Eidim that said dead, and two Eidim that said didn't die, and the bottom line is the guy can walk in any day, he's not actually dead. This woman is not getting remarried unless she did her diligence and knows for sure he's dead. So the Chachamim, so Bezdin has a certain measure of confidence that they can, if she's willing to go get married, we can let her stay married. But where the Adam are not saying that the guy's dead, the Adam are only saying he's divorced. So first of all, clearly he can walk into Bezdin because he's not dead. And even if he does, what's the worst case scenario? He says, I'm not divorced. Well, then she'll say, yeah, you are. I have two Adam saying, I think we're divorced. I have Adam backing me up. So what are we nervous about? So Bezdin will say, we're not as confident that she, necessarily is, did her diligence. And therefore, in this case, we'll tell her, listen, find your get, make sure, find other Adam, do whatever you need to do. Don't get remarried just on the basis of these Adam themselves. But the Gemara asks, a kasha that says, so you're telling me that if the girl gets married, we have to at least be choshesh that if should a man come in and say, I did divorce you, you would respond and say, no, you didn't. Or sorry, all the way around. If the man came in and said, I didn't divorce you, we'd have to be concerned that the woman would fight back and say, of course you did. You did divorce me. The Gemara says, would a woman really have the chutzpah? If a woman says to her husband, you divorced me, we believe her. Why? Chazaka ain't isha miza penad because we have a chazaka that a woman would never do that. Women, I guess, they wouldn't be mazed panav to do that. So why are we concerned she would do it here? But the Gemara answers, Hani mili Adam. You're right. In a regular case where you don't have Adam saying that she got divorced, a woman wouldn't necessarily say it on her own. But here we have Adam coming to Bezdin saying that she got divorced. So of course, that's not maze panim. That's not chutzpah. She's just agreeing with her Adam. Over here she would be. And then we'll just do maybe the third answer and then we'll stop. Rav Asi Amar to explain the steer and Rabbi Yochanan to go into Amri Adam Achshav Mace, Achshav Girsa. The Adam aren't saying that the guy died 10 years ago, the divorce happened 10 years ago. They're saying it happened recently. So Misa, like a Lavrura. In the case of Misa, it really doesn't matter when it happened. The bottom line is we have two saying this way, we have two saying that way. If the girl, remember, this is a case where one of the Adam are marrying the girl is a Bari. If she's willing to get married, we'll believe her. But when it comes to Gerushin, if the Adam are saying that the Gerushin happened recently, like Eddie's been saying the whole time, so then we're not going to let the girl get married. If it happened recently, show us the get. If it happened 10 years ago, all right, she lost the get, and we're obviously in a town where the Bezdin doesn't hold on to it. But if the Adam are saying that the divorce happened, obviously that would have. Well, so it can't have happened last week because remember, women have to wait a few months before they get remarried. But the point is, if it happened, within a few months, so then, all right, don't get remarried. Hang on to the get, show us your get, and then get remarried. So Gerushin, just finish the Gemara. Equal of Rura, Dermina Le, Im Isa, Dahati Haba, Achsi Le Gatach. And I guess we can stop here. It seems like people are